Morning, everyone. We are preparing to wind down the 118th Congress with the NDAA Farm Bill extension that's being contemplated, and of course, the continuing resolution, while simultaneously preparing for the 119th Congress. Democrats have consistently made clear that we are ready, willing, and able to find bipartisan common ground with the incoming administration on any issue, particularly as it relates to driving down the high cost of living for everyday Americans, which we must tackle together and decisively, while at the same period of time, we've made clear that we will push back against far right extremism whenever necessary. It has become increasingly apparent that many of my House Republican colleagues want to jam big tax cuts for the wealthy, the well off, and the well connected down the throats of the American people and try to pay for those tax cuts, which will not benefit everyday Americans, by cutting Social Security and Medicare. This is not a hypothetical, it's not hype, it's not hyperbole. It's happening before our very eyes because extreme MAGA Republicans in the House are telling us publicly and repeatedly that's exactly what they plan to do to the American people. House Democrats are clear we will oppose any effort to end Social Security and Medicare as we know it. There is no mandate to take that type of aggressive action that will hurt working class Americans, and the American people will reject it, and House Democrats will work hard to stop it. Questions? Ali?
Can you talk a little bit about the gavel jockeying that we're seeing within your caucus? It does seem like some younger members are being pretty open about the fact that they're challenging the way things previously have been done here.
Well, House Democrats have clearly been in the midst of a generational transition, standing on the shoulders of Speaker Emerita Pelosi, Steny Hoyer, and Jim Clyburn, along with other longstanding members who we continue to revere. And as we prepare to organize for the 119th Congress, as is often the case and has been the case in the past, uh, committee leadership challenges emerge. Let me also make clear that House Democrats continue to value the experience that many long serving members of the caucus bring to the table, as evidenced by the fact that earlier today, unanimously by acclamation, without any contest, Richie Neal was confirmed as the top Democrat on the Ways and Means Committee. Maxine Waters was confirmed as the top Democrat on the Foreign Financial Services Committee. Rosa DeLauro was confirmed as the top Democrat on the Appropriations Committee, and Frank Pallone was confirmed as the top Democrat on the Energy and Commerce Committee. So I wouldn't read too much into the fact that committee challenges have emerged in certain quarters because the caucus tends to evaluate committee leadership on a case by case basis. And as evidenced by the results this morning, as it relates to four significant committees, the best members, who happen to be the most senior members to lead those committees, emerged at the top. Thanks. Go to this side.
The party's been doing a number of listening sessions after the election. Those seem to have wrapped up. What do you hope to do with everything, all this information that you've absorbed from members?
Well, our conversations with each other as part of our after action analysis will continue to be ongoing and be candid, clear-eyed, and comprehensive, but at the same time constructive. What is clear in terms of what's emerged from the conversations to date is that it will be important for us to focus on driving down the high cost of living for everyday Americans, working class Americans, middle class Americans, and everyone in this country who aspires to be part of the middle class. Grocery prices, too high. Gas prices have been too high. Childcare costs, too expensive. And housing costs, way too expensive all across America. And the one narrative that clearly emerged from this election at the presidential level, House and Senate, is that the American people want us to work together to solve problems on their behalf, and in particular, drive down the high cost of living. Thanks. Second row.
I want to go back quickly to the gavel races, particularly in the Ag Committee. Obviously, Ranking Member David Scott is a senior member of the CDC, a group that upholds seniority and one that you're a member of. I know that you have stayed neutral in this process, but do you think that other senior CDC members in the future could say that maybe you won't defend them since you haven't taken a position on this standing?
I haven't had a single member of the Congressional Black Caucus express that concern to me.
Many people outside the party are now calling for regionalization of the party and pointing specifically to Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. What do you feel about her role for the Democratic Party moving forward, and what must the party do to meet with this requirement for rejuvenation and get a new message out?
We have many talented members within the House Democratic Caucus, and that, of course, includes both Jerry Conley and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez.
And what must you do to move forward and get a clearer message out?
We're going to work together as part of our ongoing conversations with each other to make sure that we are decisively communicating with the American people. That effort is going to be led by the Democratic Policy and Communications Committee under the leadership of Debbie Dingell, along with Laurie Trahan, Lauren Underwood, and Maxwell Frost. We're excited about what's ahead for the DPCC and our caucus-wide engagement and making sure we more decisively communicate with the American people. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Leader. Ranking Member Adam Smith put out a statement yesterday saying that he was voting against the NDAA, particularly because of anti-trans provision. Will you be supporting the NDAA, and how many Democrats do you think will oppose the NDAA due to that particular provision?
We're not whipping on the National Defense Authorization Act. It's a member-to-member, case-by-case analysis in terms of people making decisions as to what is the right thing to do. There's a lot of positive things in the National Defense Authorization Act that were negotiated in a bipartisan way, and there are some troubling provisions in a few areas as well. I haven't taken an official position yet. I'm still evaluating the four corners of the National Defense Authorization Act, and I'll make a decision in advance of going to the floor later on today. Go back to this side. Thanks.
On the tax cuts for next year, obviously you're going to have a very narrow majority here. Are you concerned that they're going to come out here and Democratic votes on this? Are the one night on the tax cuts, or is there some diversity?
I think it's clear that with respect to certain areas of tax reform, including strengthening the child tax credit, strengthening the low-income housing tax credit, which is used to create affordable housing for low-income families and working families, and in some cases, moderate-income families as well, along with restoring the state and local tax deduction, which was unnecessarily taken away by Republicans as part of the GOP tax scam in 2017, there's some common ground potentially to be found. But overall, we are not prepared to go down a road where there are massive tax cuts for the wealthy, the well-off, and the well-connected, which is what happened in the GOP tax scam, where 83% of the benefits were set aside for the wealthiest 1% in America. And every single Democrat in the House of Representatives voted against it. If the Republicans go down the road of the GOP tax scam 2.0, I'm confident there will be no Democratic support, particularly if they decide to pay for some of those tax cuts by cutting Social Security, cutting Medicare, cutting Medicaid, cutting nutritional assistance, or cutting support to our nation's veterans. Last row. You got it.
Thank you, Leader Jeffries. Oversight Chair Homer has mentioned is that something that's being considered in negotiations, and is that something you consider
It's part of the Four Corners negotiation that will intensify in the days that are in front of us. And it is a provision that I support and proudly voted for on the floor of the House of Representatives. Thanks.
Leader Jeffries, wanted to get your thoughts on the drone situation out of New Jersey. Lawmakers yesterday obviously were concerned that they weren't really able to get any information on the hearing yesterday. We know the New Jersey governor has been meeting with the FBI. For you in Congress and within your capacity, it seems the main concern right now is that there's been no transparency from the federal government. Can Congress do anything, or would you want to take action on this matter if you're not able to get more information?
We need a greater degree of transparency from our law enforcement authorities, and we'll make sure that that happens in the days and weeks to come.
With regards to the NDAA, I know that you said that you haven't taken a position on it yet, but there's also a lot of pro-life measures, poison pills that Democrats are against. Can you elaborate on that?
Well, with respect to the current version of the National Defense Authorization Act, the attacks on reproductive freedom have been removed, and the attacks on diversity, equity, and inclusion have been removed. And that's a victory for the values important to the American people that Democrats strongly support.
The Treasury Department has been advocating for anomaly language in the CR to protect Inflation Reduction Act funding for the IRS and ensure that an additional $20 billion isn't frozen or doesn't remain frozen. Is that part of what Democrats have been advocating for in CR discussions? Has that been a priority?
Protecting the climate forward provisions of the Inflation Reduction Act, which are designed to make sure that we can have a sustainable and livable planet for generations to come, will continue to be a high priority for Democrats in every single negotiation that proceeds, including in connection with the continuing resolution. Thanks.
Thank you, Leader. I just wanted to get your thoughts on the Daniel Penny verdict, whether you think that was the right decision and what you think the appropriate response should be from those who disagree with it.
I respect the verdict, but that was a tragedy and it should not have happened. And we've got to do a better job of making sure that we have a more compassionate, enlightened response to dealing with the mental health challenges that so many Americans are experiencing, particularly in the aftermath of the COVID-19 pandemic. I'm sorry, I'll go back over to this side and I'll go to you. Yeah. Yes. Yes.
I'm just wondering, have you spoken with President-elect?
Trying to be equitable here.
Thank you.
Both sides of the aisle.
Have you spoken with President-elect Trump since the election, and given the margin in January that the Republicans were able to have, so how do you see your relationship?
I've not spoken to him directly, but do anticipate at some point in the next few weeks, either prior to the 20th or January 20th or thereafter, we'll have a conversation. And as I've repeatedly and publicly indicated, we are prepared to find common ground with the incoming administration on any issue, particularly as it relates to the most decisive ones to emerge from this election, which in our view is to deal with the high cost of living. The American people are correct that the deck has been stacked against everyday Americans for decades in ways that undermine the ability for far too many Americans to access the American dream, which is when you work hard and play by the rules, you should be able to provide a comfortable living for yourself, for your family, purchase a home, educate your children, have access to high quality health care, go on vacation with your family every now and then, and one day retire with grace and dignity. That's the American dream. It's out of reach for far too many people because the deck has been stacked against them for a wide variety of reasons, including the outsourcing of good paying American jobs that have been going in the wrong direction, poorly negotiated trade deals, the dramatic decline in unionization, and the rise of automation, which has some consumer benefits, but also costs the American people, particularly in the inner city, in small town America, and in the heartland of America, good paying jobs. This is a problem that should be decisively addressed by Democrats and Republicans, the House and the Senate, and the incoming administration. The Biden Harris administration did some good work in this area as the most pro organized labor administration in modern American history. And through the American Rescue Plan, saving the pensions of more than 1 million hardworking members of organized labor, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, bringing domestic manufacturing jobs back home through the CHIPS and Science Act, and of course, standing up a clean energy economy and attaching prevailing wage requirements to that, along with driving down the high price of life-saving prescription drugs and taking effect on January 1st of next year, capping out-of-pocket costs for tens of millions of Americans who are on Medicare at $2,000 a year. That's game-changing and will bring costs down. But because the system and the deck has been stacked against everyday Americans for far too long, there's a lot more work that needs to be done. And if the incoming administration is committed to doing that work, then they will find partners in the House Democratic Caucus.
So on AI regulation, has there been any progress made out of the AI bipartisan task force? Senator Schumer on the floor yesterday said that Speaker Johnson and I agreed that all our committees should keep working together to figure out a way to get AI legislation done before the end of the year.
I agree with Senator Schumer, and it's my hope that some bipartisan progress can be made in this area in connection with the continuing resolution.
Thank you, Leader Jeffries. On the Global Communications Center, funding for this appears to have been snuffed in the NDAA. This is essentially the State Department's disinformation arm. Have you spoken with House Democrats about that? Have they expressed concerns to you? For example, Ranking Member Meeks, have they expressed anything to you about this?
Ranking Member Meeks is working hard on this issue, and it is increasingly important that we engage on a global level in terms of disinformation and deal with the challenges that we face here in America with respect to disinformation.
Hi, Mr. Leader, thanks so much. Fast forwarding ahead to the new year, January 3rd, have you been in any talks at all with Speaker Johnson about the speaker's vote? Do you think it'll be smooth sailing, or would there be a need for any Democratic help from your side of the aisle? And following up on that, just a couple of days later will be January 6th, the certification. Also on that, are you expecting that to go smoothly? Do you think there'll be any protest votes or objections to certification from either side?
I don't anticipate any disruption with respect to January 6th. House Democrats and the Democratic Party are not infested with election deniers. With respect to January 3rd, I can say with a relatively high degree of confidence that no Democratic votes will be forthcoming for any Republican speaker candidate on January 3rd. In terms of my own nomination, I'm just trying hard to get to 215. Kevin.
Do you think Governor Hochul should face a primary, and do you plan to endorse her?
I think Governor Hochul has done a very good job under difficult circumstances as New York State has emerged from the pandemic to deal with the challenges that everyday New Yorkers have confronted. And I look forward to our continued work together on the governmental side. And I have confidence in her leadership. Same period of time, I don't plan to make any endorsements in the mayor's race at this period of time, which will come in 2025, let alone discuss what's going to happen in the governor's race the year after.
Have you been briefed on the incident with Representative Mace yesterday? She wrote on Twitter or X that she was accosted by a transgender rights activist. What do you make of that? And what do you make of the temperature right now in terms of potential threats?
I've not been briefed on the incident, but have made clear that members of Congress should be provided maximum protection as we move forward in this environment of intensifying political violence. No member of Congress should be accosted or assaulted or attacked based on their political beliefs. This is a democratic, free society. And the reports, at least, of the alleged assault and attack on Nancy Mace are very troubling, but I have not had the opportunity to speak directly with her.
Do you believe that following the elections, the center of gravity in the Democratic Party has shifted away from progressives? And what role do you see the Progressive Party playing in the new Congress?
I have great respect for members of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, the New Dems, the Blue Dogs, the Problem Solvers, the Congressional Black Caucus, the Congressional Hispanic Caucus, the Asian and Pacific Islander Caucus, the Equality Caucus, and the Women's Caucus. We, as House Democrats, authentically and most closely represent the hopes, the dreams, the aspirations, the fears, the concerns, the anxieties, the life experiences, and the passions of the American people, consistent with what the framers designed the House to be in our democracy. And it's my expectation that everyone's engagement will continue to be important. And my view of the House Democratic Caucus has been everybody matters.
When you look at the post-election map, you have, blue on the coast, and then you have this enormous sea of red that's practically the entirety of the rest of the country. Those are the voters that members of your caucus are saying Democrats desperately need to find a way to win over. And yet, your leadership team is all the coast. The ranking members that you just named are all the coast. The head of the CBC, the CHC, KPAC, they're not just the coast, they're all from New York City. How are you going to speak to the middle of the country if your entire leadership team is from elsewhere?
Well, I think the House Democratic Caucus is broadly reflective of many parts of the country, and there's no circumstance where we would be at 215 incoming members if that, in fact, weren't the case. If it was just a caucus that was dominated by members from New York and California, we'd be less than 100. The last time that Donald Trump took office, there were 241 Republicans in the House of Representatives in January of 2017 and 194 Democrats. We're entering into a Congress that will be evenly divided, notwithstanding the extreme partisan gerrymandering in North Carolina, which handed them the majority. Now, we look forward to working as hard as we can to win seats back in Michigan and Pennsylvania and deal with the extreme partisan gerrymandering that has created complications in places like Wisconsin. But we're not going to give up on the heartland of America when it's our policies and our values that are consistent with making life better for people who live in the heartland of America. I also think that it's not an entirely comprehensive take to look at the election results, particularly at the statewide level, and suggest that Democrats are a coastal party. There are 7 presidential battleground states, 7. Georgia had no statewide elections, meaning with respect to statewide elections outside of the presidential contest, there were 6 battleground states, which everyone agrees broadly reflects where the American people perhaps are at in terms of swing voters. 6, not including Georgia. Senator Casey was unfortunately defeated in Pennsylvania and more than $100 million in outside money was spent against him, but he was defeated. That's one presidential state in terms of the battleground. What happened in the other 5? Well, in North Carolina, notwithstanding the fact that Donald Trump won at the presidential level, Democrats won the governor's race, the lieutenant governor's race, the attorney general race, the secretary of state race, and the state Supreme Court in North Carolina on that very same day that Donald Trump won the presidential election. Are we on the run in the state of North Carolina? What happened in Wisconsin? On the same day that Donald Trump won at the presidential level, Tammy Baldwin was reelected. Are we on the run in Wisconsin, in the heartland of the United States of America, when Tammy Baldwin won with a Republican president winning at the top of the ticket? What happened in Michigan? Another heartland state. Alyssa Slotkin won the Senate seat and is on her way to the United States Senate. Are we on the run in the heartland state of Michigan? What happened in Nevada? Donald Trump wins the presidential election, but on the same day, same set of voters, Jackie Rosen is reelected to the United States Senate. Are we on the run in Nevada? And in Arizona, and by the way, in Nevada, all 3 House Democratic incumbents reelected. And in Arizona, Donald Trump wins somewhat convincingly at the presidential level. But Ruben Gallego is on his way to the United States Senate. Same day, same set of voters, same election. So there were 6 battleground states that had statewide elections outside of the presidential election. Democrats swept 5 and only lost in Pennsylvania. That doesn't sound to me like we need a complete makeover. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.